Welcome to Module 5, Evaluation of the CDOT Fiscal Year 2015 Grant Application Technical Assistance Modules. During this module, you will learn how to fill out the evaluation section of your CDOT grant application. Hopefully you've watched the other 4 modules that have walked through the earlier sections of the grant application, including problem identification, project rationale, and developing goals, objectives, and activities. Like the other modules, we're going to continue our example of Fake County and walk through how we're going to develop the evaluation that accompanies the goals, objectives, and activities that we develop during Module 4. Looking at the guidance for the grant application, you see that the project evaluation section is 15 points, which is pretty substantial. So definitely something to pay attention to, and a lot of times grantees for applications that I have reviewed or have looked at, particularly those that have been submitted to CDOT, really don't spend as much time on this section as they probably should. Generally it's getting towards the end of the application and you're running out of space, and so people try to cram everything in as quickly as possible, but 15 points is pretty substantial, and so you want to make sure that you're paying as close attention to this as you are to the other sections of your grant. The other thing to keep in mind is that this evaluation section should be completely related to the goals, objectives, and activities section and the project rationale section. If you are writing different things in your evaluation than what you wrote in the other sections, it's not going to flow and you're not going to receive the points. So here the instructions ask to describe the evaluation strategy that will be used to show project effectiveness and to document successful activities. An evaluation plan should be designed so that an independent observer can confirm or measure whether or not the objectives have been met and progress was made toward the goals by changing numbers, knowledge, and attitudes. The application asks you to consider 2 types of evaluation, process and outcome. So outcome evaluation is really what most people are going to measure your ultimate success of for the project. So did you actually achieve your objectives? Those are going to be your outcomes. Process evaluation is really looking to how well you implemented the program that you laid out. How well did you do your activities? And so they're going to give you some information for that piece. The evaluation section evaluation criteria seems pretty simple, though you'll see that it's a little harder to think through unless you kind of have some structure to it. But in general, this is what we have to do. We have to clearly articulate the appropriate process evaluation measures, so who, what, when, where, how many for each project activity. And this is going to mean the major project activities, not the sub-activities and not the tasks that you may be putting lots of detail in there. You don't need to include everything, but for your major activities. And we have to clearly articulate the appropriate and realistic outcome evaluation measures. So basically, how are we going to measure our objectives and our goal? And then we also need to indicate for both of those things clear and reasonable timelines and give some information about how we're going to collect and analyze the data. So a lot of this is kind of jargony and complicated, but luckily Jan had put together a presentation I don't know, almost a year ago, I would say, around project evaluation. So Jan, can you walk us through your presentation, please?
So when we think about evaluation, what do you really want to know about your program? Maybe you want to know how many classes were conducted or how many participants were in each class. You might want to know who conducted the class and how long the class lasted, what curriculum was used, or even how did people hear about the class. And then finally, you might want to know if people liked your class. These are all process evaluation measures. So process evaluation addresses program activities. It addresses who, what, where, how many activities. And you might wonder why this is important. It's important because if your program works perfectly, you know how to replicate it. And if your program needs tweaking because your outcome is not changing or is even getting worse, then you know how often you performed activities, the locations that were used, your methods to contact target populations. You can have a better sense of what was successful and what wasn't, and what type of approach might work better next time. If your project wasn't as successful as you wanted, maybe you could use this information to convince your funder that though you did not meet every objective, there's still a problem that needs to be worked on, and if you change X, Y, and Z, you'll have a better success moving forward. So these are the process measures, and again, these more relate to the actual activities that you're performing. Next, we're going to move into some outcome evaluation. And the questions for outcome evaluation, when you're thinking, what do you want to know, did parents increase knowledge? Or did parents say after the class that they would put their kids in a booster seat? Are more kids in booster seats before or after school? Again, these are all outcome evaluations and are getting at changes in behavior or in knowledge or attitudes. So, like I just said, we're measuring changes in knowledge, attitudes, skills, and/or behaviors as a result of your program. This is important because it shows you're making progress towards your goal or your objectives by changing numbers, knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors. And if your outcome is not changing or is getting worse, then you need to think about changing your approach. So you may still be wondering, how do I perform evaluation? So we'll give you some examples of where you could get data from in order to answer specific questions. If you're conducting educational classes and you want to know how many classes were conducted or how many participants were in each class, then you might find this information from an attendance list or an instructor log. If you want to know more specific information about how people heard about your class or if people liked the class, then you could use class evaluation forms or satisfactory surveys. The first two groups that I just went over are examples of process evaluation. Now the ones in red here, did parents increase knowledge and did parents say after the class that they would put their kids in a booster seat? These are examples of outcome evaluation. You might find this information from pre or post tests that you've conducted, and these would be self-reported. Or if you are wondering if there are more kids in booster seats before or after school, you could conduct observational surveys. Again, the bullet points in red are outcome evaluation measures, and then those in black are process evaluation. So as a reminder, a successful grant application will have a goal, an objective, activities, and tasks. And all of these are tied to each other. They should all build upon each other, and you will evaluate each of these elements.
Thanks, Jan. That makes a lot of sense to me, and I think that we have really set ourselves up for success for the evaluation plan by how we've structured the goal, objective, and activities during our last module. So just as a reminder to those of you who might be viewing this or seeing it for the first time, during the last webinar we created one goal, 4 objectives, and then complementary activities for a Fake County project that targets youth, law enforcement officers, and parents in order to help support graduated driver's licensing as our strategy or our overall rationale, and we're hoping to really impact CDOT's performance measure related to young driver fatalities. So here's just a reminder. Our goal is to reduce the number of drivers aged 20 and younger in fatal crashes in Fake County from 10 in 2012 to 8 by 2014. And then we have an objective related to our coalition activities and really getting people to participate in our action plan for our other objectives. Then we've got an objective related to increasing seatbelt use among teens at 5 Fake County high schools. And then we have an objective about parental knowledge of graduated driver's licensing, and one around knowledge for law enforcement and their willingness to enforce graduated driver's licensing. And that's about it. An easy way to structure the evaluation plan is actually to create some sort of table. Now you don't have to put this in a table, you can explain this in words and things like that. So you may just want to put a table together in our notes and our outline and then explain this in text if you really don't have the space to put in a table. But I think that the table makes it really easy and clear to make sure first that we're hitting all the evaluation criteria for this section and that we actually have a strong evaluation plan for our project, and this would be something that we could actually use later on to develop our measures and for our reports and that kind of thing. So how we laid it out is basically a 6-column table. We have evaluation methods for, and then you can see here we laid out goals 1, objective 1, activities, objective 2, etc. So we didn't have enough space to reiterate everything that's up here in all of this text for our goals and objectives, but we can, because we numbered things in a logical way and we've already referenced it, it's pretty easy for the grant reviewer to refer back to the goals and objectives. This is a common thing that happens with grants for space. So you may want to, when we write this, Jan, for real, we may want to actually insert a paragraph here kind of explaining this is our evaluation plan, and please reference the actual text of the goals, objectives, and activities in the previous section, just to help the grant reviewer know where to look. But it's fairly self-explanatory. So let's just walk through this and make sure that it makes sense. So we've got the evaluation in this first column that I just talked about. We have measures, so what data are we actually going to try to collect. You will sometimes hear measures referred to as indicators. Here I kind of mean the same thing. The data source, so where are you going to find that information? The data collection plan, who's going to do it? How are you going to collect it? The timeline for collecting that data, and then here we inserted a column to just make it clear, since the grant evaluation criteria specified that you have to include evaluation measures for process and outcome. We labeled, based on what Jan covered in her presentation, what type of evaluation it is. So as you might remember, goal 1 is reduce the number of drivers aged 20 and younger in fatal crashes in Fake County from 10 in 2012 to 8 by 2014. Here you see that we have written our measure as the number of drivers aged 20 and younger in fatal crashes in Fake County. We're going to find that information in the CDOT 2016 problem ID, because that's when that report will contain 2014 data. And then our plan is to look at that report and compare our 2012 numbers to our 2014 numbers. We're not going to be able to do this until January 2016, but when we do, it will be an outcome evaluation. So even though that's outside this particular grant application's timeline, I think it's a nice thing to include here, because it indicates that, you know, as a coalition or as a project team, we really are going to go back and refer to the document for problem identification and see how we did in helping to achieve those goals. So we will look at that. Objective 1, as you remember, is increase levels of coordination and collaboration to support the implementation of evidence-based programmatic and policy strategies related to reducing teen motor vehicle fatalities among Fake County Teen Driving Alliance members by September 30th, 2015. Here you see for Objective 1, we are going to measure the level of participation for each Alliance member, and we are going to get that from an annual coalition collaboration survey. We're going to do the survey at a baseline survey and a follow-up survey, and so the baseline survey will be in October 2014 and the follow-up survey in September 2015. This is also outcome data. And then finally, Activity 1.1 was conduct monthly Fake County Teen Driving Alliance meetings to implement activities under Objectives 2 through 4, so for the rest of the project. This measure is the number of Alliance meetings. The data source is the monthly meeting agendas, and we're going to count the number of meetings based on the number of agendas that we have. We're going to do this just once a year in September 2015, right before the grant is ending, and this is an example of a process evaluation. Jan, why don't you walk us through Objective 2?
Okay, for Objective 2, we are going to increase the percent of Fake County high school students who wear seatbelts from 70% to 80% by September 30th, 2015. So for Objective 2, our measure is teen seatbelt use. We're going to get this information from observational seatbelt surveys at 5 high schools. The teens involved in the high school challenge are going to conduct unannounced seatbelt checks at 3 time points. We're going to do the first one in January 2015 before they have any intervention activities. We're going to do a post intervention observation in March of 2015, and then we're actually going to do another one in May, maybe after, maybe they've forgotten a little bit about the intervention, and so we're going to see where they still stand. And that is an outcome evaluation. Our activity for Objective 2 is that between January 1st, 2015 and May 30th, 2015, the Fayette County Teen Driving Alliance will hold a 12-week seatbelt challenge between 5 Fayette County high schools. So the measure for Activity 2.2 is the number of schools that completed the 12-week challenge. We're also going to keep track of the type and number of challenge activities and the number of teen participants. So this information will come from high school challenge notebooks, and the Alliance members will review the content of all the high school challenge notebooks and count completed activities, and then they'll also count the number of participants for each activity. This will be completed in May of 2015 after the high school challenge is finished, and this is a process evaluation.
Objective 3, increase the percentage of Fayette County parents who report accurate knowledge of the graduated driver's license law to 25% by September 30th, 2015. So here the measure that we're looking for is very just found right in the objective itself. So it's the percentage of Fayette County parents that accurately report all components of the graduated driver's license law. Now we know that we can find this information from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment because they have evaluation data that is built into the online system. This will require Alliance members to obtain the post-course evaluation results from CDPHE, and then after counting the number of parents from Fayette County that took the graduated driver's licensing test, we will then look at the question around how well they were able to name all components of the GDL law and calculate a percentage that answered that question correctly. We will do that just once a year in September 2015, and this will also be outcome. Our activity that we wrote related to Objective 3 was, as a part of the 12-week high school challenges at 5 Fayette County high schools, students will recruit their parents to complete the online parent GDL course. So for Activity 3.1, we will have a measure of the number of Fayette County parents that complete the online graduated driver's licensing course. So in thinking about where we could find this information, we thought that it might work to have students, since they're supposed to be recruiting their parents to take the course, when their parents complete the course, they could print off the completion certificate, give it to their son or daughter, and then that certificate will be how we count that the parents completed the course. Since it's a competition between schools, we want to make sure that we can count that per school, and the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment is not going to have the exact school location of every parent that took the course, so we're not able to just use their data. We'll have to collect some of it on our own. So we'll do this by having schools that participate in the high school challenge. They'll count the number of completion certificates that students bring in from their parents, and then that will be how we can facilitate the competition between the schools. We're going to do that at the end of the school year in May 2015. Objective 4 is to increase the percentage of law enforcement officers who report enforcing the graduated driver's license law in the last 6 months to 50% by September 30th, 2015. Objective 4's evaluation plan then is to measure the percentage of enforcement officers who report enforcing the graduated driver's license law in the last 6 months. We're going to do this using a law enforcement GDL survey. We're going to obtain that survey from the CDPHE law enforcement survey tool that they used at the state level, and we can just use the same one. It's actually posted on their website. And we'll give that to our law enforcement agencies in Fayette County at baseline and at follow-up, and then we'll be able to analyze the results. So the baseline is going to be in October 2014, and then the follow-up in September 2015, and this is an example of outcome evaluation. So looking at our activities here, if you did watch the last webinar, we actually inserted 2 activities that are evaluation related. Activity 4.1, as shown on the screen here, is around collecting that baseline survey, and activity 4.4 is about collecting the follow-up survey. But as you could see, we actually just incorporated that into our evaluation plan, and we really don't need these activities here. So I'm going to just delete them now, And this is very common when you're writing a grant, that as you do different sections, you often have to go back and realize that, okay, maybe I can tighten up a previous section. So this is a good example of that. I didn't really need those two activities in here in the way, and it'll save me a little space to write the other sections. So now I'm going to fix my numbering so that it still makes sense. And now we have two activities related to that objective. Activity 4.1 is, in March 2015, the Fayette County Teen Driving Alliance will use the roll call video and PowerPoint developed by the Colorado Teen Driving Alliance to conduct two presentations for law enforcement to educate them about the current GDL law and encourage enforcement. Here we're going to use the following measures. We're going to look at the number of presentations for law enforcement. We've set a goal for ourselves for 2, but we may end up doing more than that. And then we're also going to look at the number of law enforcement attendees that attend these sessions. We are going to get this information from the attendance roster for each presentation, and after we have those, we'll count the number of presentations and the number of attendees using this attendance roster. We're going to just wait until September 2015, and then we will count them all up. And this is a process measure. Lastly, Activity 4.2, between January 1st, 2015 and May 30th, 2015, partner with Fayette County Police Department to host high visibility enforcement campaigns at 5 Fayette County high schools. So Activity 4.2, our measure is the number of high visibility GDL enforcement campaigns, and we also want to look at the number of warnings issued during those campaigns by law enforcement officers. We are going to collect this information using a high visibility GDL enforcement tracking tool that we just made ourselves. So we'll just give it to the officers to complete once they agree to conduct the campaign, and they will fill out a tool for each event, and this will help us count the number of campaigns as well as the number of warnings issued. We'll tally that all up by September 2015, and this is another example of a process measure. So Jan, I'm going to have you check us and to see how we would do if we were using our project evaluation selection criteria as a checklist. Do we have clearly articulated and appropriate process evaluation measures for each project activity?
I think we do. I think that table lays it out really nicely. And so if we're supposed to meet who, what, when, how many for each of the measures, I think we've done that because we listed our measure, we listed where it's coming from, who's collecting it, a timeline. So yeah, I think so.
Do we have clearly articulated, appropriate, and realistic outcome evaluation measures for each project objective?
Yes, again, just kind of what I said the last time, I think it applies for both the process and the outcome measures the same, so I think we have it covered.
And do we have clear and reasonable timelines and methods for collecting and analyzing data?
Yes, with the exception of the fatality data, which we won't have until after the grant period. All of our timelines are within the grant period, and we will be reporting at the end of our program or at specified intervals.
Great. So now we just have to remember, if we do go back and make any adjustments to our goal, objective, or activities as we complete the rest of the application, that if we add one or take one off, we also have to make sure we sync that up with our evaluation plan so that we have that there. The other thing we're going to have to remember to do for the entire application, since this is just our outline, we need to make sure to proofread, because I could see in my table there, sometimes I had periods, sometimes I didn't, sometimes I used capitals, sometimes I didn't. So we'll just have to make sure to go back and make that all consistent when we're finished. I think we're ready to move on to the next module, which will be Agency Qualification and Past Performance. Please view that webinar next to get some tips on how to fill out that section of your grant application.